me making this video is actually kind of amazing. I realized after looking at a thread over on a stupid, and they're all stupid, photography forum, by people that actually own medium format cameras, including several of them which own mini medium format cameras, including, I was like, surely there's some knucklehead on YouTube. There's one video by Hasselblad that comes kind of close, but he only describes less than half of the 4 reasons why medium format is superior. Like, well, it's a bigger sensor. Well, that's a description. It's not an explanation about why medium format would be superior to full frame. Now, obviously, there is a phase 1 sensor. There's a larger sensor than the 44 by 33 millimeter sensor that's in the GFX here, for example. But we're just talking about medium format, period. Okay? We're not talking about specifically just the GFX or the phase 1 sensor. We're just comparing medium format in general with a full frame sensor or even a crop sensor. Just both of them, all of those two combined into one there, full frame and crop sensor. I found it absolutely amazing and mind-blowing that none of these sites on you could do a deep search, you won't find anything on the web other than that one Hasselblad video that I found that's like, why is a medium format, why is it better? Why? You think, well, it's megapixels. Well, it's photo site size. Well, you know, the phase 1 has like another stop of dynamic range over above that of the GFX, but then we're talking about another $34,000. Dynamic range is a factor, but it's not one of the 4 important factors that actually differentiate out medium format from a full frame sensor, a full frame sensor, or a crop sensor. Medium format, for example, of course, everything's about geometry. We're talking about equivalency. When we're talking or mentioning equivalency, we're certainly talking about geometry. You're looking deeper into a wide field of view. Now, for example, the 110 millimeter f2 is equivalent, and we're talking about geometry when we use the word equivalency. The 110 millimeter is equivalent to an 86 millimeter something f1.5, basically an 85 millimeter 1.4. It's pretty damn close, okay? The 110 millimeter f2 is equivalent to an 85 millimeter f1.4. What if, for example, your 85 millimeter lens on your full frame camera had a viewing depth of 110 millimeter? You know, because even though this has a field of view of 85, basically, okay, let's just say 85 rather than 86, we still have a 110 millimeter lens. Now, these are not the 4 reasons. Let me get to the 4 reasons here. And nobody explicitly brings these out, including the Hasselblad video, which includes a British guy with a phase 1 sensor in the back of the Hasselblad. He mentions a couple of these 4 points, I believe. I think he only mentions one. I'm surprised he didn't get the 2 important ones. It's like, surely Hasselblad would have pointed that out. It's not megapixels and it's not resolution. You know, some of the older 24 megapixel medium format sensors, when you look at them, you can tell it's a medium format sensor. I mean, if you look at the TIFF or the digital negative, like, well, that's medium format. If you know what to look for and you know what you're looking at, it's like, that's medium format right there. I don't even have to know what camera took that. I know it's a medium format camera. That's an older medium format, so it's not megapixels. Like the Nikon D850, 46 megapixels basically. I have that camera. You know, even though it has incredibly high resolution, you put the best lens at Nikon, you could slap on a Nikon like a Zeiss APO sonar, and you have the Nikon D850, and you got tack sharpness. It's not about the resolution, and it's not about the megapixels, because if you use an old Pentax 645D image, which is 24 megapixels, you know immediately you were looking at a damn medium format image. So what the hell is it? What are the 4 points that actually make medium format superior? And I found it shocking, because there's actually a post on a photography forum, and I was reading it today. I was like, none of these people, all these people have medium format cameras, and the thread is entitled, what does the medium format look? You know, what defines the medium format look? Now, one person mentioned equivalency, but nobody ever hits on why medium format is better, or what is a medium format look, quote unquote. To make things in a simple analogy for getting to the 4 points, since I used to do some of my own tattoos. If you get bored, you tattoo your feet. Well, not you people, but someone like me. Tattoos, for example. Let's just take a same tattoo. Let's say it's a fish, or, I don't know, a chick or something like that. Just a tattoo, right? A specific design that's heavily detailed. The same tattoo, scaled down to a smaller size, Both the large and the small tattoos are the exact same amount of informational detail, or the same megapixels as far as the image of whatever that tattoo would be, but one is on a smaller area of skin. It is the case, like when you go to get a tattoo, you pick out your favorite design, whatever the hell it is, and then it has to be scaled to fit the sensor, or the area of the skin you plan on putting it on. Right? Well, it is the case that I've hung around tattoo shops a lot, obviously, since I'm completely covered in tattoos. The tattoo artist will tell you, it's like, well, you know, you're using, let's say, for example, this is my sensor size. You're using a pretty large piece of skin here, but your tattoo is so detailed, the tattoo artist will remove the detail. Not only will the tattoo really fine details mush out over time on the skin, which is not important relative to a sensor comparison, but in this analogy, the tattoo artist will remove the ultra-fine details because he cannot jam all that information into a smaller hunk of skin. It's impossible to render depth and detail easily, even if you have the same amount of details. Like the 46 megapixel Nikon D850 compared to the, I'm getting there, okay, hold on, bear with me a second. 46 megapixel Nikon D850 with the sharpest Zeiss lens I could slap on there. Now you could zoom in and you could see, like, wow. And I did that a couple weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago. It's just wow, it's amazing. But it does not look the same when you do the same image on a medium format. Take a look at the image as a whole and what you could actually crawl into it. You have the same amount of information. You're looking at the exact same field of view. If you're looking through like a keyhole window out into the front yard, all the details remain the same. The viewing distance between that window, let's say it's a window like this, like on the front door there, versus a much larger window. You have your face the same distance from that window, but you actually have a much larger canvas that you actually have the depth by which the area, the actual real estate, to render those tonal details. Now, like one example you'll find online, I think it's a Wikipedia entry, it's like the negative or sensor size that's much bigger, i.e. medium format, are generally capable of more detail and tonal range. It's not about detail, because when you look at a 24 megapixel medium format image, you know immediately, even though it's relatively low megapixel compared to a GFX or a Nikon D850, you know immediately, if you're used to it at all and know what the hell you're looking at, you'll know immediately that's a medium format image. So it's not about resolution. It is about tonal details. For example, for countless years, even 8 megapixel images have been rendered to sizes that are 8 feet tall by 20 feet wide, even huge billboards. It's all about viewing distance, but the amount of tonal details you can actually get in there on a larger canvas allow for the medium format to be superior. So let's actually now talk about the actual 4 points that actually make a medium format sensor superior, and actually what is the medium format look. I have also said, by the way, specifically that the Nikon D850 is like a baby medium format. I mean, you can zoom way the hell in, you could crop the hell out of the shot. The pixel pitch count is identical to that, which is what, 4.2 micrometers? Identical to that of the Nikon D500. You have what, 15 or is it 12% better on the Nikon, the GFX, which is 5.52 micrometer pixel pitch. I'm sorry, I can't remember all. Yeah, 5.3 GFX on pixel pitch and 4.2 on the Nikon D500. Anyway, the 4 points are: you have identical field of view. Say an 85 millimeter on the Nikon D850 or the 110 f2 on the GFX. You have an identical field of view, but you have a completely different canvas size, or in this case we're talking about real estate or sensor size. Both are the same megapixels. Let's just say that the Nikon D850 is basically 50 megapixels and the GFX is basically 50. There is not that much difference between 51 and 46. Both essentially nearly the same megapixels. You have a larger window. You're actually able to see closer, but required, and this is a fact, this is not my opinion, you're able to see closer, but you have to zoom in less. It's also the case when you go to make a print that image, whether it be a TIFF, a digital negative, a JPEG, oh, you wouldn't use a JPEG. You got a medium format camera and you're messing with JPEGs, and it's like having a Lamborghini and only driving 10 miles an hour on it. So, you're not using the full capability of what the hell that car is capable of. You're shooting JPEGs, or using JPEGs, or messing with JPEGs on a medium format camera. You're certainly pisting away your time and money. You're able to actually don't have to require to zoom that image in as far to create a 20 by 30 print or something even larger than that, like an A9 print. You're actually able to see closer, but required to zoom in less, and that is the case. And I got two images on the link below. They're the most boring images in the world, taking the exact same distance on the Nikon D850 with an 85 millimeter and the 110 millimeter. Same distance. You actually don't have to click in as far at 100% to see a larger image and see the details more. So that's point number one. Point number two is that there is better dynamic range, since a 50 megapixel is not a 50 megapixel. Well, what the hell does that mean? That's what people generally don't understand. Well, 50 megapixels, what's the ton? It's like, yeah, but 50 megapixels is not 50 megapixels. Well, what the hell does that mean? That means with a larger sensor, 50 megapixels, you're actually able to stick larger eyeballs on it. What is the advantage of a larger eyeballs? Like the GFX is 5.3 micrometer, Nikon D500 and D850 are exactly both 4.2 micrometer. With larger eyeballs, you actually have better dynamic range because the actual point at which the photo sites clip, or basically the cup runneth over, shall we say. The larger a cup is, the more water it could hold. The larger the photo site is, the better well capacitance there is before the specular highlights actually bleed out and are lost, the details are lost, and when the image is clocked off of the sensor for processing and dropped on the card, you still actually have those specular highlights. You're actually able to pull back, or you still have the highlights there, whereas on the smaller photo site, you have a smaller photo site well where the specular highlights clip easier. So essentially, ultimately, we're talking about better dynamic range on a medium format camera. This is where 50 megapixels, for example, is not 50 megapixels. A camera is certainly not a sensor because there's a lot of AD conversion, SNR firmware, and how the image is processed in the camera. But there's also the case that if you have a larger bit of real estate in the camera on the sensor, you're actually able to make those eyeballs bigger. So that's point number two. Number three, and this is really, really important, is the quote-unquote Lord of Lenses here, meaning me. You have much larger lenses on medium format that are designed for that anyway. Much larger lenses that are easier to build, with nuances becoming less and less important for rendering the image. The same reason, for example, you could take like a 300 millimeter, which you wouldn't want to do, a really huge lens like a 300 millimeter 2.8 or a 500 millimeter f4. Not that you would ever want to do this, but you could literally take a chisel and knock a hunk right out of the center of that lens, like a big ass hunk of glass, like enough to make you choke to death on. It's like, oh my god, the lens is destroyed, but because that huge lens is so frigging big and it's dropping it on, say, a 35 millimeter sensor, that lens is so damn big, removing out that huge hunk of glass, you won't even see it unless it's under certain flare conditions. You won't even see the fact that the front element is missing a gigantic divot of glass. The larger the lens is, the less susceptible. I've seen people sell lenses on eBay. I'll buy them. It's like, oh my god, it's got a big fungus spot. It's like, yeah, but it's a really big, fast lens. Like a big honking fungus spot, like on a 300 millimeter 2.8, you could have a fungus spot that frigging big, and it won't even show up on your images because that front element is so huge. The same is the case with the medium format lens for that larger real estate sensor, is you're actually able to build these larger lenses that with much wider tolerances, a bigger room for error on the nuances of actually capturing and rendering the image on that larger sensor. Number four is this is a simple one, you have much less lens and photosite diffraction. Because an f2, we're talking about an f2 being equivalent to a f1.56 in 35 millimeter equivalent. This is equivalent to an 86 millimeter at 1.56, so you have less lens diffraction and you have less photosite diffraction when it comes to smaller apertures on this larger lens, on this larger aperture, on this larger lens actually. You have to realize too that the aperture at f8 on this huge ass lens, for example, is not the same as the f8 aperture on an 85 millimeter f2, f1.8, f1.4, doesn't matter. Yeah, this f2 is not equivalent to the f2 on 35. So you have a much wider tolerance for diffraction and the nuances of rendering the image. And so you got those four things that actually make up not only the quote-unquote medium format look, but also the superiority of medium format. Now, of course, medium format has a huge deficiency, and that's speed. I mean, there's nothing slower on this earth. Slow as a constipated turtle. Slower than a geriatric constipated turtle than a medium format camera, but they're not made for speed at all. They're made for hardcore slow architecture, high-end portraiture, product photography, corporate gigs, stuff like that. So those are the 4 points that actually make up medium format difference, or the medium format look and the superiority of medium format. You have identical field of view with a different canvas. So 50 megapixels is not 50 megapixels, secondly. And we're talking about better dynamic range. We're actually able to slap larger eyeballs on the sensor. But like I said, you are looking deeper into a wide field of view. So remember, you'll have 110 millimeter focal, yet it renders a field of view identical to that basically of an 85 millimeter and a 35. And also you have to zoom into the image less to see as large of an image, and the image from that sensor, that digital negative or TIFF file, however you saved it, from the medium format has to be enlarged less to reach an 8x10 or 20x30 than does the tiny. Isn't that the case? Smaller little sensor needs to be stretched more to reach 8x10 or 20x30 than does a larger sensor. It doesn't have to go as far. Obviously, that's the case. So I hope that wasn't too boring. It probably was. Someone probably already fell asleep, but I was kind of pissed. It's like, why didn't anybody point out these facts? Those are the differences between the two, or actually what defines the medium format look or the superiority. Both one and the same thing. People could say the medium format look is also the superiority of the medium format. They're both really synonymous. So we have medium format look and the superiority of medium format, both meaning the exact same thing we're referring to. And of course, when we talk about superiority, everything, every advantage has a disadvantage. The larger the sensor is, the longer it takes for that shutter to cover it, and people don't understand that either. It's like, well, 60th of a second is a 60th of a second. No, it's not. It's the same thing like on a large movie curtain. While the slit, front curtain, second curtain, are exposing the sensor at 1/60th of a second, it takes longer to cover a huge-ass movie screen than it does, a small little screen. It's the same thing with me. That's why medium format 2 is more susceptible in hand-holding to slower shutter speeds. You can get away with it on the crop sensor and full frame. When you talk about medium format, and you start getting down at 1/150, really like 1/200th of a second, it's easy to induce shake. They're very picky. They'll start to scream with shutter shake at much higher shutter speeds than you're accustomed to, and that's something else you have to take into account. Thanks so much for watching. Have a nice week. Bye.